Hello, everybody. This is Professor Hamamoto. It is November 10th, year 2022, 3 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Welcome, one, welcome all. Depending on your political persuasion, you still might be reeling from the after effects or celebrating in the wake of yesterday's election. Not me, however. I didn't have much hope for any sort of substantive transformation. It's frustrating to me to see Americans go on this roller coaster ride, up and down, emotionally, intellectually, uh, getting their hopes up, and only to be dashed over and over again. So rather than just me complaining about it, I decided to put a talk together, which you're about to see, that helps explain why we are in this impasse. And I trace it, of course, this is cultural forensics. I trace the problem historically going back to the earlier part of the 20th century. Don't tune out yet. I promise you, you're going to get your space brothers, your UFOs, your Lemurians, your Atlanteans, all that fun and game stuff. And I take it seriously. I don't mean to sound like I'm trivializing it. Not that I either admit or deny to the existence, validity, the reality of all these entities that I've just spoken of, but I mention them at the outset only to establish the fact that this is where I trace our perennial problems, these sort of millennial hopes that the great white beings, right? I'm not talking about ethnicity or race, right? The great white brotherhoods. Does that sound familiar to you? Yeah, it comes right out of theosophy. There's going to be some sort of, and it has nothing to do with gender or race. Okay, you got that? It's a phrase from them that has taken on a different meaning in the post woke transformation, right? Whether it's a permanent transformation or not is really up to you and me, but it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen at some sort of midterm election or even the national election in 2024, right? And I'm not just asking you to be patient. I'm asking you to put in the very difficult intellectual work and labor, and probably even more difficult, the emotional work that's going to be required to overcome your prejudices. And when I say your, I include myself. I have to overcome certain realities or blocks that I had, either through the lack of study or intellectual cowardice or just laziness, right? But I realized that after having gone through the Orange Man Revolution and the midterms and the different personalities that cross the historical stage, and nothing seems to be changing, that I have to intervene here and offer up to the best of my ability my analysis, my cultural forensics report on what we as a people, as Americans, and I'm a fourth generation American for those of you who are still can't wrap your mind around the fact that there are Asian people in the United States, because you don't get to see them. Especially you don't see them in political commentary or cultural commentary. We're excluded. We're still in the concentration camps. And a lot of it has to do with the concentration camp of Asian people themselves, Asian Americans, Japanese American, whatever you might be, right? I know my ethnicity is very much still locked in a concentration camp of emotional and intellectual slavery and imprisonment, right? So and I'm mentioning this because we have to break out of that concentration camp in order to get over this continual cycle of expectation and hope, right? The God That Failed, that's a book about millenarianism. It's not unique to the United States. There's something called the Tanakh, right? There's something called the New Testament. And we're just talking about the Judaic and the Christian. And of course, we have to include the, world of Islam that has these millenarian hopes. It seems to be hardwired into our tradition, whereas, and I'm really simplifying here, whereas in East Asian religions or South Asian Buddhism, there is not really so much of an emphasis on the Messiahism, or messianistic thought, chiliastic thought, or even eschaton, right? And I think, and I mention this because this is one of the appeals that non-Christian, non-Judaic, non-Islamic religions have to the masses in America, right? We're still waiting for the man on the white horse. Could be Napoleon. It could be Adolf Hitler. Could be Joseph Stalin. It could be Mao Zedong. Yeah, I'm using all my accents because one of you dickheads said, "Hey, what's up with the accent?" Hey, what's up with you using a phrase, "what's up"? That comes from the black people. Only black people can say "what's up," right? So how I read that is like you want to put me in a little Chinaman box, right? So I can do little chinky accents, but I can't represent my people in totality, right? Okay, I'm giving you a little scolding lesson because you're going to see a big conference about how America and the world is going to be enlightened by looking to the east, to the mystical Orient, right? And look to the sky for our Lemurian space brothers. Right? When you're looking up at the sky, you're not watching your who's picking your pocket. I think that's part of the psyop there. So yeah, they're talking about Buddhism, Hinduism, all these syncretic combinations of religions, one world. Aldous Huxley, the perennial philosophy. You've heard about it already. If you're not, jot it down, check it out. This seems to be part of the spin cycle of American politics. And it's even inscribed in our own dollar bill. Yeah, the dollar bill. Gonna get paid. You don't even have to go into the Benjamins. You just go to the dollar bill. And if we have time, we're going to get into it. In fact, I have a whole set of video clips. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get through them, starting with the whole conference that starts tomorrow, by the way, just conveniently during election week, midterm election. Do you think that's an accident? I don't think so. Supposedly it's because of 1111 or mystical numbers and all that. And they might be, but we're going to see that. I'm going to show that come hell or high water. As soon as I get through my introduction here, then I'm going to show one of the key figures who I didn't know about. Yeah, I don't know everything. I'm learning along with you, but she's been around the scene a long time. Her name is Paola Leopizzi Harris. Okay. Check out the bloodlines of the Leopizzi. I haven't had time yet. Okay. This is where we can all work together. I took her at face value, like I do most people that I meet or encounter. But I'm beginning to suspect she's part of a larger operation here, and it may go back to the Venetian days. We don't know. It might go back 500 years. But check out the Leo Prizzi. It's a name I have not encountered in vernacular Italian culture. So it might have some sort of Cagliostro, who knows? It might go way back there. So check her out. But anyway, she's hosting and she's organizing and I guess profiting from, which I have no problem with, right? If you want to have a Comic-Con convention and you go to the trouble of organizing and line up all the speakers and buy all the advertising and rent out the convention center and get all the banquets set up and you make some coin, some money. Oh, it's good for you. Thank you very much. I've been to many conferences and more or less enjoy the fellowship and sisterhood and just the gathering of the tribes, meet each other. I haven't done it in the last couple of years like most people because we've been under lockdown purposely to separate our energies, which can only be fully appreciated in person and face to face, right? No matter how good YouTube might be in certain applications, it really lacks in that very vital dimension. So I'm going to show you a little bit of that. And she's very much connected. And this is where I come in personally, because I like to talk about myself. All right. Well, in truth, I think a lot of you find it interesting that I have been implicated in a lot of these scenarios that I talk about, right, objectively. Right? So I speak from authority and experience to a certain degree, but she really got her start, and she started this fellow here named Ricardo Gonzalez. Okay, pardon my Espanol accent, Ricardo Gonzalez. Okay, but I studied Spanish for many years. We studied elementary school in California, public school. We study Espanol. So hopefully, I should have picked up some of it, right? Because this California Republic, state of California, the history. I look at my other talks that I talk about the missionaries and the Spanish, the Dominican Jesuit, and that whole system, and how the University of California, Santa Barbara, they're all built on the mission system, right? And this is applicable, even though there was no mission Saint Mount Shasta. I'm talking about a larger occultic history that makes California so unique, right? Most, it's Hollywood, it's nuts, blah, blah, blah. And you just leave it at the personality, Kim Kardashian, Kanye West, blah, 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 woof, woof, right? But it goes much deeper than that. And I'm only going to be able to scratch the surface today. But that's where she started bringing in large people there, because there's a whole subculture of Atlantean / Lemurian Mount Shasta cultists and worshipers. And I have an article that I found, I don't have in front of me here, maybe I do, that it's a whole bibliography. Yeah, here it is, Mount Shasta annotated bibliography, right? Legends Lemuria. I'll post this on my Patreon. I think it's in the public domain. But it's a multi-page article. It's not paginated, but it has all these different articles that go back to the late 19th century. So this is a really long-standing cult that's surrounded around the beautiful Mount Shasta, which I've been by many, many times. I've never climbed it. I never would even attempt to climb it. But it is a power center, and I recognize that. If you even drive up Highway 5, Interstate 5, that goes up through California from Mexico, all the way through the midland of the midsection, Central California, in other words, Northern California, into Oregon and beyond. You will be impressed by the majesty of Mount Shasta. So I can understand why people would have these mystical experiences, which I do not discount. Okay, that's not what this talk is about. I'm not bashing that type of encounter with, if you want to call it, God, even though they don't like to talk about God. They like to talk about the Great White Brotherhood or the cosmic race. And that's where there's some problems here. And this is where atheism and even Luciferianism is being sneaked into through the back door of the American political process and our own American political culture. And therein, I am arguing today, is why we Americans are held in this impasse, where we're in this cycle of expectation and dashed hopes. And the next person, man or woman, or perhaps even a hybrid, a cryptid, maybe it's going to be a space brother who runs for president of the United States. We have all our millennial hopes and dreams and material wealth sometimes, like, we've invested a lot of money from mypillow.com into, pony number 1, 2, or 3, or maybe all of them to hedge our bets. All right. So we have to do the spade work. And by that, spade is a shovel. We have to dig into our cultural historical past, which goes back into colonial times, not just colonial, but goes back to the origins of a lot of these beliefs into the British Isles, Southern Europe, and Asia. Because remember, I told you that this contemporary iteration of this perennial philosophy, this syncretism of Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Sufism, all of it, right? That's what Aldous Huxley was trying to do, Julian Huxley, to break down Christianity primarily, because it's been such an incredible force for good. And we know about all the evil stuff because that's all they teach at the university, right? I'm talking about, the public, I'm not talking about Hillsdale College or just, 1 or 2 institutions that try to understand human history in its totality, not just the parts of human history that are ugly and meant to demoralize us so that we say, oh gosh, we're doomed. Well, let's just hand ourselves over to the space brothers and get transported off planet Earth. It's all contaminated anyway. Please take me, ET, come home. Right. So you have all the syncretism here, and supposedly drawn from the East. But let me ask you, right? Because I'm prejudiced. But here's the poster for the event that kicks off tomorrow, which is Friday. It's going to probably be a Friday, Saturday, and people start leaving on Sunday. It's a typical conference schedule. They'll start trickling in probably tonight for cocktail hour, but by Friday morning they'll be having their bacon and eggs and having their little lunch and cocktail hour, and I think they're even going to dress for a banquet. I bet you I know what the entree is going to be. Chicken. Oh man, rubber chicken. But tell me if you notice anything about the ethnic racial makeup of all the speakers who are supposedly talking about the wisdom of South America and Native America and the Andean peoples, the Indians and your Chinese people, right? It's kind of interesting. The ET person, the people who come off the UFOs or they find these bodies, they're always supposed to be like mongoloid. And by the way, I don't use that term anymore because they finally realized it's probably really disparaging. So they call it Down syndrome. But they're always Asian, right? But you never see any guys like that at these UFO. I'm the only one. So I'm just thinking, ladies and gentlemen, put down a comment if you think it's a good idea or just a whack or whatever. I think I'm starting renting myself out for these type of UFO conferences as the only Asian ET looking person in attendance. And I'll even wear a skin tight silver lame spacesuit, one piece, of course. Okay, here's the advertisement with that. I assume Paola Leopizzi Harris had called all the shots on who's going to be an invited guest. And by the way, I don't cast this because I haven't read any. I don't know who any of these people are. Not to imply that I'm, knowledgeable about who is on the all-star roster of ufology, as it's sometimes grandiloquently referred to. I only know some of the major players, people like Dr. Stephen Greer, right, who's been around for a couple of decades at least, and some other people I highly respect, Richard Dolan, and that group. I've seen him in person. He doesn't make any of these grand claims about encounters of a third, fourth, or fifth kind. So I tend to respect his research and his work. He's written a lot too. So he's just one person. That's why I'm not saying that I'm discounting this entirely. So let's take a quick look at some of the principles that are involved with this conference that starts this week. And again, if you didn't catch my drift, I think the reason why it's starting this week is not because of the conjunction of certain numbers, 11 and 11, but because it's midterm, right? The whole thrust, I think, of this Psyop that we're seeing, the UFO, it's not Project Blue Book or Blue Beam, right? I'm correct myself, as some people are arguing, right? And it probably is. I don't know. It's really about a larger, comprehensive, at least century-long attempt to depoliticize the American polity by using these mesmeric, after Anton Mesmer, who, by the way, was from the occult world, right? You heard about animal magnetism, Mesmer, Franz Anton, or Anton Franz Mesmer. It goes back. In fact, this is one of my references for today's talk. It's called The Masonic Magician, The Life and Death of Count Cagliostro and His Egyptian Rite. And these are written by people who are sympathetic to him, right? Because if I draw on someone else, you can say, well, that's just prejudice. But just by their own accounts, they damn their own project, right? Because I'm not down with Count Cagliostro, right? And I'm not down with the Bavarian, all the offshoots, Bavarian Illuminati, the the people of the Great French Revolution who created a secular republic, in their minds at least, and even the Illuminists of what became the United States of America, right? The dark side of it, and we have those two rails in America, and we need to recognize them. So here's the poster. Let me pause it. If you can't see it, I have it on. I made a little movie, so it's going a little quickly. Let me expand it so I can read. It's called Starworks. I guess that's her company. I'm just assuming if I got it wrong, Ms. Harris, please forgive me, but it's called Gaia. You got the little space iconology, little flying discs, and yeah, we've read, our Die Glocke, like we've read all Joseph P. Farrell, so you don't have to put it in the comments, right? I've done my homework. You might be a newbie, but I'm not. Okay, let's just get that straight. That's all I'm going to be scolding today. All right, so it's Laughlin UFO, Laughlin, Nevada. I don't know who any of these characters are, but I'm not a CRT person. I told you. I was there when it was real, right? And then it was later hijacked by the corporations and the Soros Foundation, and probably these people as well, or some iteration of the Space Brotherhood. But so notably, there's some gender balance, I think, but there's definitely not an ethnic or racial. So I'm not going to pay $250, $300 just to show up and make a point. So I'll just comment it. And by the way, I'm not coming from a standpoint of bitterness or resentment, because that's basically my life. What you see there, right there in front of you on the poster, is what I lived my life watching American television, American films, American fiction, magazines, and academia. And it was a big deal when I got tenure at the University of California, Davis. They hadn't had an Asian American who was not in the sciences, right? That is, in the humanities, social science, and the non-science area, who had been tenured about 20 years. Okay, that's the degree of segregation that goes on at the esteemed University of California. But I was able to sneak in, because I'm super badass, and they just really couldn't ignore me. So here's some to finish out this. Okay, I showed you this one already. Now this guy here was brought into this group. Let me put my head back into the game here, just so you're watching the Professor Hamamoto channel. Ricardo Gonzalez first was brought in, and he was targeted and recruited because he started doing independent work down in, he's a Peruvian national, and he had some kind of governmental job. People have to check him out too. It's kind of suspicious that he just kind of left government and then all of a sudden became all in on the UFO circuit. But he was first brought in through Shasta, and because that seems to be a giant recruiting source for them. Now the conference that starts tomorrow is in Laughlin, Nevada, godforsaken part of the country. It's mostly desert, except for the casinos. But they've met in prior years up in Mount Shasta, which is very close to where not real, about 200 miles, 150 miles, let's say, from where I am. But it's right in that region, which I'll get to in a moment. But first of all, let's see. Let's take a look at Paola Harris herself, Leoprizzi Harris. Do you notice any, or do you detect any sort of black nobility in her, or northern Italian, some sort of papal family influence? I don't know. She seems to me like she's an American, but she claims to be Italian national.
And I'm sitting on my patio, and I am really wanting to talk to people about Laughlin, because we structured an early bird so that people can get the whole entire package before August 1st. So there's only 17 days left. 17 days to save $50. What it includes is a gala dinner where everybody's going to be dressed in purple. It includes a cocktail party, because I've hired a pan flutist from Peru. And the title, it's theme-based. So it's called Messages from the Andes. It will be the last conference in Laughlin, Nevada. I've enjoyed these 14 years, but I am moving on to other.
Okay, she's moving on other adventures. Yeah, I'm almost tempted to crash the party, showing up as the Asian Oriental looking space brother in my one piece silver lame spacesuit. But I think I'll pass. I don't want to intrude on their royal purple banquet. That's royal purple. They are the anointed ones. And I don't say that facetiously because there's an elitism in this whole movement of ufologists that comes from the Theosophical Society that is breeding the Great White Brotherhood. They call themselves the adepts, right? And of course, when you're reading it, you're feeling good because they make believe that, or at least you're inferring, you're assuming that you by entering this world becomes an adept. You are being inducted to the different degrees of enlightenment, which you will pay for materially, right? It's a business, it's commerce. Like, again, I don't have any problems with it. You want to spend your money that way in buying memberships, your way in. I had colleagues at the University of California, I'm sure it's true at Yale or Harvard, whose families are fabulously wealthy and they buy them professorships. That's the story of Bill Ayers Jr., as in Bernardine Dorn, his father. Yeah, he built an entire residential dormitory at the University of Chicago. I think it says the Bill Ayers, housing. So it can be done in different ways. So if you want to spend your money with, fine. Like that. Here's my connection to it, as I promised you. This is my town. It's called the Emerald City. Remember the Wizard of Oz, or Oz, right? That's some kind of Babylonian euphony at work, and I'm sure Frank Baum knew about it. And you know that Wizard of Oz was not about Toto and the Tin Man and Dorothy. It's not some kiddie tale, right? The kiddie tales, the adventure stories, are always adult stories that are transcoded. You know that. It was about precious metals. It was about gold and silver and the whole banking economy in a nutshell, right? That's the Wizard of Oz. So I live in the Emerald City, and there's a bridge you'll see here. It's painted gold. It's not real gold, gold paint. And then in the background, just kind of to the left of it, check out the ziggurat. It's in West Sacramento. I've been by the building. There's a little park there. There's a minor league ball field there, the Sacramento River Cats, and that's the Sacramento River up there. And by the way, it goes up through Mount Shasta. A lot of the snow melt from Mount Shasta goes into the Sacramento River. And I live right by one of the tributaries right here. I can walk outside of my little hovel here. I'm not rich, but I live in a little. In fact, the neighbors didn't want this development to go in because it was going to lower property values, just like condos, And these are all like giant ass multi-million-dollar homes that I live. But I'm like 2 minutes away from the tributary of the Sacramento River. It's very nice, very pleasant. I hope it doesn't overflow. We're having some heavy rains already. So here's this is right by downtown Sacramento. Gavin Newsom could probably walk to this, and probably not. He'd be driven. He has a driver, take him there. But there's a drawbridge there. I've been in this area many, many times. If you looked at the lower part of the frame, you'll see the top of some kind of flat structure. That's actually a paddle wheeler that used to go up and down. This is gold country we're talking about, right? We're talking about the 49ers, right? This is the gold of the Golden State, but it runs all the way up north through Mount Shasta. So this is my world, ladies and gentlemen. This is right in my front yard, not my backyard.
The mighty Sacramento, a 447-mile-long waterway accumulating snowmelt and rain runoff from 19 different counties in Northern California. It hydrates thirsty farmland and provides drinking water to millions of people from San Francisco to Redding. And it all starts right here, in this hole in the ground. That's fresh. Located at the edge of the Mount Shasta City Park is the headwaters of the Sacramento River, and it's arguably the cleanest water in the state.
So pure, so clear.
It tastes really good. It's very refreshing.
We empty all our water bottles and we fill it up with all this water.
People from all over the world travel to this park to sip from the headwaters because of its highly filtered properties.
And it's clean. There's nothing, there's no dirt, there's no bacteria, it's just clean. We test the water up high every year.
Scientists estimate it takes 50 years for snowmelt on Mount Shasta to filter through the billions of tiny cracks before flowing out of the headwaters. And when it does, historian Bill Meese says it can be a spiritual experience.
Tens of thousands of people have kind of visionary experience here. And that's partly related to the legends, but it's partly related just to the magic of the mountain.
The legends and magic that Bill is talking about is that of the Lemurians, a mythical colony of highly evolved humans that live inside Mount Shasta.
The way I like to say this is that there's basically 5 main legends of Mount Shasta.
Those legends, according to Bill, came in the form of 5 books, each one explaining or advancing the Lemurian legend. Bill did a deep dive into each one of the books, and he was willing to share the cliff notes with me.
They were tall and thin and regal, like 7 feet tall. They had gold nuggets that they paid the locals with.
Okay, that's your great white brotherhood. You notice the theme of tall giants, gigantes. It's very much part of the mythos, but that is part of the mythos of the superior being. And some of you may know that some of these racial theorists of the early 20th century were very much influenced by Blavatskyism. That's why I refer to this talk. I titled it Crypto-Blavatskyism, because we're seeing its return in the UFO Psyop, right? And we're also seeing its return in the emerging bioeconomy. That's going to be the culling part, because racism in its more obvious manifestations, slavery, segregation. I grew up in residential segregation. Obvious, immigration laws, right? Asians were prevented from immigrating to the United States as recently as 1965, right? That's one of the reasons why I taught Asian American studies, is because this is part of our national history and world history as a result, because it also drained intellectual talent from Taiwan and brought it to Silicon Valley and Route 128 in Boston. I call it Operation Rice Paperclip, because all the Nazis had pretty much aged out, so they had to bring in new intellectual labor from Asia. Anyway, you won't see that type of history being recorded amongst the Lemurians, as one of these wags mentioned here about writing about the UFO whole history. He said, hey, how come no black people have ever been? I think there was one mixed racial couple, a mixed marriage, so-called, that were abducted, but black people, I mean, it must be great. I mean, Ye should be celebrating. There's zero chance that Ye is going to be abducted, other than by his Mossad handler, and the other celebrity. You know that story, right? You might get committed to the nut house over at UCLA and put on psychiatric meds and threaten to never see your parents again, Ye, but you will never be abducted by Lemurians or our space brothers. So, hey, thank you. And neither will you might run into Commander Sulu. They let a yellow guy on the spacecraft Enterprise and Lieutenant Uhuru, the black woman. Believe me, there was a lot of thought that went into the casting of Star Trek. Star Trek. Anyway, here's another
Your world,
bit.
but through my eyes. This is Watt's world. Meanwhile, I'm halfway up the mountain.
We're going to go down into the vortex and walk toward that bright light.
This all sounds...
I know.
It does, doesn't it?
I do it all the time.
Really?
This is the only way to experience the city of Telos.
Can't you just dig a hole?
Well, we had some people who tried to do that several years ago, but that didn't work.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's get our chairs up.
Of course it didn't. Telos is apparently home of the Lemurian people.
But could they come up through the vortex and sit here in our world?
I've heard stories about it. They'd come walking into town to get some supplies, and so they'd pay the shopkeeper in gold.
No photographic evidence, of course. So here's an artist's rendering. I'm going in. Ashlyn charges $250 for her services, by the way.
Okay, I get a sense that we're
All right. That's Mount Shasta again. But the point I'm making here is that we're not just talking about a small group of people. The whole Mount Shasta cult, and by extension, really, because it's been revived through this conference here. And I'm reading this book that's full of Blavatskyan types of talk and speak, coded, because they're sophisticated by now, and so is Harris, although she doesn't really know much. She's more of an organizer, but I've seen a lot of her tapes, her interviews and whatnot. She really doesn't know much, but she knows how to put these conferences together for a certain political agenda, which is to take our eyes off political realities and move them to outer space, right? Or inner space, right? The caves, the Lemuria, into the vortex. But if you read this book with against the grain, you will see the Blavatskyan imprint right there. And one of them is that we have to, we normies, who don't even necessarily follow the UFO movement, think that, oh yeah, the government needs to be transparent, right? You've heard the magic word disclosure bandied about by some of these people, including Dr. Stephen Greer, right, who can bench press 440 pounds, right, and who can outwalk and outrun a person half his age and is a medical doctor in the ER room, although he hasn't done that for quite a while. I mean, he's presenting his bona fides that we're supposed to bow down to his superior wisdom because he has these skulls, paracas, right, from South America. That's why there's a huge interest in South America in particular, and in bringing in at least a token few South Americans instead of people who look like they came out of some the French Laundry restaurant in Napa. That's what they look like. These are probably Marin County people who are going to most of these conferences from California or Santa Fe, New Mexico, where all the wealthy occultist, capitalist, Silicon Valley type people go. They go to Burning Man, right? That's the cohort there. I'm just kind of giving you the demographic. Now, if you're an underclass white person, right, you're not going to be welcome there either because you are of the wrong social milieu. This is not, outer space is not going to have you, right? No people who like country music or from Southern Appalachia or from quote unquote the boonies, because they have a contempt for you, right? So it's really beyond race or ethnicity. They have contempt for anybody who's not part of the Great White Brotherhood, the adepts. And do you think that's just an American thing? No. Let me throw out one name for you. His name is Vasconcelos. Not Latino, but straight up Mexican national, right? What's his first name? Can't remember his first name, but his last name is Vasconcelos. And he was a part of the elite ruling class of Estados Unidos de Mexico. And he wrote a book in 1925 that was titled in Espanol, La Raza Cósmica. Sorry for the exaggeration, but as I told you, I took many years of Spanish in public school, so I feel like I need to use it instead of saying La Raza Cósmica, or Buenos Dias. I may be failing, but I'm at least try to have a certain level of proper pronunciation in homage to Senor Robles, who used to teach us Espanol on closed circuit television in the Anaheim Union School District way back in the old days, right? So La Raza Cósmica, as you can figure out, means the cosmic race. And guess where he developed that idea? From the Theosophical Society. It's in the notes in the back. I have a bilingual edition in Espanol and in Inglés. right? It's there. And he says, yeah, there's a race here. We are the European, because, he's Mexican national, but there's a racial hierarchy. They call it tres culturas, right? There's the European, there's they admit black people, and then there's also the indigenous. They should expand it to four, right? There's cuatro culturas. By the way, there's a stop on the Mexico Distrito Federal, District of, Federal District, Mexico City, great subway system. And there's a stop called Tres Culturas, but they need to add one more. And I would say it's tres or cuatro culturas, which would include the Asiáticos, right, which is me. And Mexican people stole property from Japanese immigrants too. It wasn't just the United States. Why? Because they shared the same racial ideology as people in El Norte, right? So it's a lot more complicated beyond race and nationality and ethnicity, right? We're talking about a metaphysically shared worldview by Eduardo Vasconcelos, who turned out to be he wound up as the Minister of Education in the whole country, the whole country of Mexico. And he was also the rector, which means the chancellor, the president of UNAM, the National Autonomous University, the major university of Mexico. I've been to the campus. It's huge. I've never been in such a university it's like a little city in itself. It's not easy to get to by the subway. You have to do a lot of walk or you have to drive, but I hoofed it in there. So anyway, the point is Vasconcelos is not American. He's Mexican, but he was an attorney trained, but he did apprentice in a law firm up in, I think it was DC or New York. So he needs to be looked into. So we're talking about international movement. And I think part of the war that's going on in Ukraine versus Russia is a spillover of these conflicts and battles that have been going on for a couple generations now, maybe more than a couple probably going back to the reign of Catherine the Great, right? Because she was suspicious. She kicked all the Freemasons out. She kicked all the occultists out. She knew what they represented. She saw what happened, the French Revolution. You've heard the story. She supposedly blamed the Freemasonic and all that, as well as the American Revolution. By the way, that this book here chronicles much of this history and celebrates it because they're all about leveling all these institutions, church, monarchy. I'm not a monarchist, and I'm not someone who promotes a theocratic form of government. I am a Republican, like Edgar Allan Poe, like James Fenimore Cooper, like Herman Melville, going back to the 19th century. I believe in those small r, not public. That's why when I say, "Oh, it's so heartbreaking that we didn't have the red wave," I really don't care, because, as you know, it's a fake little conflict that's being put in a recycle mode by these deeper metaphysical conflicts, which, by the way, Edgar Allan Poe was very much aware of. So was Fenimore Cooper, right? And they were battling amongst themselves, because you have someone like Ralph Waldo Emerson, who was, we learned about him in school as a transcendentalist, right? But he was in favor of a global brotherhood as well. And he was very much influenced by Buddhism and other forms of a non-Christian religion, not to denigrate it, but he was really good so far as being a tool, a useful rhetorical tool for the people who want a peaceable kingdom of a fellowship of man, of course, ruled by the elite, the Illuminist elite, not you and me. They have to convince us that we're going to be there for the party, but we're not going to be. We're going to be gone by then, right? Because genetically, we will have been defiled to non-existence. Even if we were around, we would be zombified. We're already partly in that state today, right now. But there will be, this is part of the transhumanist, post-humanist agenda here. And I think that is one of the reasons. I say I think because it's just at the conjecture level at this point. I want you to join in the discussion as well. But I think the people who are part of the UFO movement, people like Harris here, the Psyop, and I'm not talking about the ones who are totally naive and well-intended, and they're more into looking stargazing. I don't want to paint them with the same brush here. I think that's they're very much consistent and complementary to the technocrats, as they're called, the bioscientists, who people like Elon Musk, who want to turn us into just one particular node in his neural link web, right, controlled by him. And he's already making his move this week with Twitter, right? It's going to even be more of a Twitterati with him in control. You know about Neuralink and all that, right? So I'm putting this all together, and he is into that kind of woo-woo stuff, isn't he? It's no accident that a lot of these Silicon Valley types were the ones who started a so-called Burning Man. What an image! Burning Man, burning humanity. The Wicker Man, 1973. You got to watch the original Wicker Man. So here is some more information. This guy, Mitch Horowitz, who was with a major publishing house, who's now on the circuit, the Tattooed Wonder. Now, because you don't have to be embarrassed anymore by being a UFO believer. You don't have to be embarrassed by believing that there's a conspiracy going on. No, you're not going to be embarrassed anymore by being called a conspiracy theorist. It's being normalized, but normalized to liberate you? No, normalized to enslave you. Here's Mitch Horowitz. I read his book several years ago. It's called Occult America, and it's presented as just an objective history of how occultism has always been part of American political, social culture. He's right about that, right? But he's not right about the fact that we are going to move in to this new age of universal white brotherhood amongst adepts, because it's not for you, it's not for me. It's for the biofit. It's for the neurologically fit. It's not for people who are being intentionally, physically, intellectually, and spiritually deformed right now through bioengineering. They now have their technology at hand.
I have my 2-volume set of The Seeker's Doctrine again. Good for exercise and good for quoting from. And again, I'm so glad to be with you all. I enjoyed this morning's session enormously. I'm also delighted to see people talk about how can more young people be brought into the TSA. People have brought their kids, and that's quite wonderful.
Yeah. It's also in the university curriculum taught by, I told you I had a dean who was a Wiccan, man. And I don't have time to go into it now. Some of these people who were supposedly talking about gender theory down at like UC Santa Cruz, and they all work at these transhumanist institutions that perfected the Human Genome Project, UC Santa Cruz, right? Which also is famous for being the serial killer capital of the world for a short time. They're all coming out now. They're all showing themselves, revealing themselves to be Blavatskians. That's why I call it Crypto-Blavatskyism, right? Nicholas Roerich, his agenda is finally coming to pass. You don't know who Nicholas Roerich is? Well, do you have a dollar bill? Check it out. You know all the little pyramid iconology there? Well, that's the doing of this other. They're Ukrainians, by the way. Blavatsky was not a Russian. Now it's coming out. She's a Ukrainian. She's probably a Kievan. When I said that the war between Russia and Ukraine goes back generations, I'm not exaggerating. It's a war of Eastern Orthodox Christianity versus the occultists, the descendants of the Edomites who settled all these areas and developed these thoughts out of Kabbalah and rabbinical Judaism, right? Now, the devout Jews who wrote the Septuagint, right, for translated scripture into Greek, that's a different story. Those were believers and those are real, but there were these people of the mixed multitude, as it's been called, who infiltrated. Infiltration is the key to control, as we know, of any type of political or even cultural organizations. Asian American studies, all the critical race theory that I told you, women's side, all that was hijacked, was all infiltrated and subverted, and we're seeing it now. And then you have Governor Ron DeSantis giving us all the buzzwords. Oh yeah, we said no CRT in our school. Well, thank you very much, but you're just like not getting at the roots of what happened. I'm glad he's doing it, but I'm not saying that what he's doing is important. But you have to consult me, right? Not Ron DeSantis. They're never going to consult me. They're going to consult Kash Patel or see, who's that other dude? He looks like Sammy Davis Jr., right? Who says, yeah, don't steal the vote. They're going to consult little, wankers like those. They'll never, because if they consult with me, they're going to get the full story. And I don't know if they want to hear that. So that's Mitch Horowitz. When I read his book, he wasn't a tattooed wonder, full out, straight on theosophist, right? Or Blavatskyan. I don't know if he's a member or something, but he is definitely a Blavatskyan. And Blavatsky, we need to check her background. She's Ukrainian. I think she is part of this larger Sabbatean Frankist cohort that helped to, establish the Federal Reserve. I'm going to leave you on a good note. I'm not ready to leave right now, but just before I forget, I wanted to show you this wonderful book. It's called The Roots of the Federal Reserve, Tracing the Nephilim from Noah to the U.S. dollar. Okay, and we're going to talk a little bit more about her work here, but let me bring her insight here that finishes out my assertion here about all this genetic defilement. She has a whole section titled Genetic Defilement here, and about the great scholars, the Jewish scholars of Hebrew, who translated scripture into Greek translation. But let me just briefly, she talks about the giants, right? You know about Steve Quayle and the giants and Tom Horn and the Nephilim. Just, she draws a little bit from that literature, but she goes a lot further and she connects it to the way that our banking system, and by extension, our government, is structured by this Nephilim agenda, right? Which is biblical. It's in the Bible. It's there. Check it out. You know that. It says, I would like to emphasize that for the Hellenistic readers of the Septuagint, translating Nephilim to gigantes, creating a deeper understanding of the nature of the Nephilim. It's a Nephilim banking system, right? Which, by the way, I showed you, I'll show you Roerich in a moment. Roerich was a spiritual advisor to Henry Wallace, who ran for president long time before I was born, right? When my parents were children. And he's the one that's Roerich, and Henry Wallace is credited with putting all that strange, bizarro, cryptic symbology on the dollar bill. That's Nicholas Roerich. Well, let me just show you what Roerich is about. And Roerich, Blavatsky, they're not synonymous, but they're in that same milieu. Okay, here's Roerich. He's got his own museum, by the way, in New York. Okay, that's the some colorized, I think it is, footage of the great master, one of the ascended masters, right? Mastership is what these graded secret societies or not so secret societies about. So here, this is from an objective source. This is from Business Insider. some guy talking about the symbology of the dollar bill. Most of you know this already, but
I'll talk a little bit about the Mac. The most prominent feature is the Great Seal of the United States. And a committee consisting of Samuel Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and Benjamin Franklin was appointed. 3 committees later, and 6 years later, a design for the seal was submitted and approved. It's 1782. And just the pyramid alone is interesting because you have at the base of the pyramid the Roman numerals for 1776, connoting the year of independence. And then you've got 13 layers to this pyramid before it ends. The message here was that this was an incomplete pyramid and had a ways to go. The floating eye here is variously interpreted. Some people see the work of the Freemasons in it. Some people just see this as the divine eye of providence. It's a debate for the ages. Annuit Septus, it translates literally to he has favored our undertakings. Novus Ordo Seclorum can be translated to the new order of the ages. Now we'll talk a little bit about...
Okay, most of you have seen these types of, they're all over TubeView and you've read them ad nauseum, but for people who are just getting into it, there's a whole history there that you might check into. So lo and behold, just at the same time that this, I don't say they're in cahoots, but this conference in Laughlin, Nevada kicks off tomorrow, our new savior, right? Our new ascended master, our new icon of the Great White Brotherhood, right? Our chief of La Raza Cosmica, Elon Musk, I'm speaking of, who's also probably related to Rorik and Blavatsky and these other people who came from the Black Sea area, right? The Edomites who migrated out of, I'm not talking about the biblical scholars who translated. There were 70 rabbis who helped almost independently of each other, semi-independently, who translated scripture into Greek, right? I'm not talking about, that group. I'm talking about these usurpers, these pretenders. Here he is, our man, our savior, and he dropped a big contract in my old former place of employment, UC Davis, to do some Neuralink research, probably with the National Primate Lab over there. They already got the students and the staff locked down. They started with the primates and then they moved to the human species. Here's our man, Elon Musk, our savior.
Musk is defending his controversial plan for verified Twitter users. Musk responded to Stephen King, who went viral with his reaction to a report that Musk wanted to charge verified users a whopping $20 per month to keep their blue check marks. King tweeted, $20 a month to keep my blue check? That. They should pay me. If that gets instituted, I'm gone like Enron. When a Twitter user told King he could afford the fee, he replied, it ain't the money, it's the principle of the thing. Musk responded to the uproar, replying to King, we need to pay the bills somehow. Twitter cannot rely entirely on advertisers. How about $8? Musk then added, I will explain the rationale in longer form before this is implemented. It is the only way to defeat the bots and trolls. Critics have pointed out that verified accounts are not simply a free perk for a certain level of user, but rather a utility that makes the Wild West social media platform more credible. Blue check.
All right. We don't need to know the pros and cons. All we need to do is that, we didn't even have a time to enjoy a cigarette after sex with Elon Musk. Like, as soon as the deal closes, okay, $20. And, I'm kind of go back and forth on Stephen King, but it could be a good cop, bad cop type of scenario. I don't trust Stephen King either, because as I intimated in a previous talk, I think he's in on the plan. That's one of the reasons why he was brought forward to write his little scary stories to keep us in a perpetual state of fear and loathing. So don't trust him either. But let me finish my thought here of this book. It's only a couple years old. And by the way, she has her own YouTube channel, which I've been watching quite a bit lately. I don't know what the title is, but if you look under Sanger, Laura Sanger, you'll find it. And she has some really interesting commentary. But she makes the point here. We're talking about genetics, right? Genetic defilement, right? Because this is the final stage in creating the ascended masters, the Maitreya, the people who are going to be God-men or God-women that are going to rule the coming utopia that's being promised by all these different groups, right? That were sponsored by the Huxleys and all, Darwin. Yeah, there's a lot of Darwinian evolutionary racist thought in theosophy and theosophical thought. That's why they have a whole hierarchy of races. And Vasconcelos recognized it when he wrote about the cosmic race, la raza. By the way, it was adopted by Chicanos in the 60s in the U.S. and their civil rights, or their main civil rights movement, took on that name, La Raza. And they changed it recently because they heard Professor Hamamoto saying that's a racist term. It comes from this mystic who was a theosophist named Eduardo Vasconcelos of Mexico. So now La Raza is called Unidos. So who says research doesn't have an effect? But now, I'm telling you, what La Raza is about. They're not about La Raza. They're not about Mexican American. They're not about Latinos. Do you think AOC is pro Latino, pro my? No, she's pro Nephilim. Okay, so let me finish with the genetic defilement here. I'm reading. The Greek word genea is where we get English words such as generation, gene, genetics. Herein lies the brilliance and divine inspiration of the Jewish translators of the Septuagint. The Nephilim agenda of genetic defilement is revealed by using translated word gigantes. By the way, there was a Mexican show maybe it's still on. It was called Sábado Gigantes. I thought it was just a stupid variety show, but Sábado is Sabbath, and Gigantes is Nephilim. Anyway, I don't know if there's a connection there, but I wouldn't doubt it. There's a lot of occultists like Leonora Carrington, American, who migrated to Mexico. Also, Frida Kahlo, whose father was a refugee from the German Revolutions, 1848, who went down to Coyoacan, right, south of Mexico City. I visited their whole Casa de Kahlo, Diego Rivera, all that, right? Which is also not very far from, within walking distance of Casa Trotsky. Yes, as in Leon Trotsky had a home right down there. So we're talking about revolutionary politics, metaphysics, the occult, theosophy, the Theosophical Society, La Raza Cosmica, Mount Shasta. It all comes together when you're looking at it through the lens of cultural forensics. And I'm not just doing this as just some sort of sterile intellectual exercise. I'm doing this as a warning to my fellow humanity that we're in a process of genetic defilement. I don't have to tell you what the delivery mechanism is. We saw it over the past 2 years. Is that a hint? Yeah, should be more than a hint. So let me finish this up because I'm running out of time. The strategy of Satan was to contaminate the seed of woman by altering the genetic code of humans, and so that the birth of the promised Messiah would not be possible. The 200 watchers who descended on Mount Hermon were intent on creating their own human race as an attempt to usurp the almighty Elohim. Interestingly, the Hebrew word for Hermon is chermon. It comes from the word sharam, which means to completely destroy, exterminate, to devote to destruction. Okay, and she promises in subsequent chapters, this is a big book, says, we will uncover along our journey that the Nephilim agenda to create their own human race as a way to usurp God's creation can be found within the globalist agenda of ushering in the new world order. It's the same agenda as Hitler had. He wanted to create a perfect Aryan race to supplant humanity. Anyway, it goes, you can tell this is biblically inspired research. Okay. And it may not be science from your perspective, but in a larger sense, it is. It's valid. And it's certainly a starting point to really evaluate this whole fake dialectic between blue and red, and why the American people continually to be whipsawed emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually by these hucksters who have our number, because we have not successfully been able to really, I won't use the word decode, because there was a show called, called Decoding the Occult. I think it was Brad Meltzer or, Jesse Ventura, some of these other wankers that the History Channel, because, TV cable is full of these shows on there. It's part of our culture that we don't even realize how steeped we are. Once we extirpate or uproot this ugly heritage that took root even in the days before the American Republic was organized, unless we go through that process that our great writers like Edgar Allan Poe, like Fenimore Cooper, and especially Herman Melville, unless we go back to their poetic insights and their meticulous study and understanding of civilization as well as American history in its nascent stage, unless we go through that, we are perennially, forever going to be stuck in this spin cycle of deceit. Right. This is not the NFL. This is not the NBA. This is not MLB, where you root for the home team no matter what. Right. Republican, yeah, for life. Democrats, you hear, you've been watching the election. Yeah, I know someone who voted Democrat all his life, and he was so surprised that he voted Republican all the way down the ballot. And that's why there's going to be a red wave. Right. I never believed it for a moment, because of this legacy that we have to look at. We have to recognize all the different psyops that's going on here, and we have to adjust. We have to correct accordingly. And I think we can do it because we've had such great thinkers, social thinkers, especially our artists, our musicians, our poets, our novelists, the ones that haven't been subverted or stolen by the Central Intelligence Agency via the Iowa Writers Workshop or through these publishing houses that are now part of globalist larger entities like Hachette, right, or some other foreign. There's no such thing as American publishing. And of course, from the previous talk that the people who are the troops, right, that do the scut work for the Anna Wintours and the Tina Browns, right? Guess where they graduated from? Yeah, Sarah Lawrence College, baby. Yeah, those are the women that won't give me a contract because they are the literary agents and they run the editorial, right? So, man, give a yellow man a break. Do I have to do some moonlighting by going to these UF conferences? Yeah, I'm your Oriental-looking space brother. Dig my one-piece silver lame spacesuit, baby. All right, that's enough from my monologue of today. But I'll leave you with one word. I know I'm running a little bit long, but could you stick with me for just 30 more seconds? Because I want the great British actor, just to show you there's no hard feelings between me and the British Empire, because, we're talking about Christopher Lee here. Let's take a look at a cautionary warning. You don't want to believe me. Why don't you check out what Christopher Lee, not in it some kind of acting persona, but Christopher Lee, the man, the thinker himself, has to say about the dangers you are running by playing with this fire.
It's well known that you have a huge interest in the occult and one of the largest collections of books of that.
I don't have a huge collection. Somebody wrote I had 20,000 books. I'd have to live in a bath. I have maybe 4 or 5. I have The Devil Rides Out, first edition, signed to me by Dennis Wheatley. There's a book just come out about him called The Devil is a Gentleman. And I have met people who claimed to be Satanists, who claimed to be involved with black magic, who claimed that they not only knew a lot about it, but as I said, I've certainly never been involved, and I warn all of you, never, never, never. You will not only lose your mind, you lose your soul.
In the occult, and one of the largest collections of books. Well known that you have a huge.
You will not only lose your mind, but you'll lose your soul. Okay, I want to leave with those words. And I'm not casting aspersions on any of you who are listening here who happen to have made these choices, right? Because you know these choices can be unmade, right? Nothing is irredeemable so far as this type of activity is concerned. So just remember those words and be cognizant of all the lollipops that the groomers are passing out continually, right? And that's also the people who are the Republicans and the Democrats both, because they're part of this larger occultic system that we still haven't been able to grapple with. It's getting harder now because they run the movies, Netflix, and the publishing and all that. There's going to be, I believe, a renaissance of independent voices who are going to be able to bypass that. You're going to be taking notes and writing your own stories and then putting them out there. We're going to read them. And through that grasp, even if we have to live in the catacombs for 200 years, we're going to be able to recapture our humanity and throw back the genetic malformation, the attempted genetic malformation of the human species by these dark forces. So, on that happy note, God willing, I'll see you on Tuesday. Have a great weekend. Thank you so much for being with me here today. I thank you for the great comments and encouragement. Thank you again. Bye.